A cultura é um dos mais preciosos instrumentos de democracia. É um canal de expressão plural que permite a convivência de diferentes vozes, histórias e visões de mundo. E por isso a cultura, tal qual a democracia, deve ser defendida e fortalecida. Essa é a função da Lei Rouanet, a principal política pública de incentivo à cultura brasileira. Com ela, perseguimos a missão de assegurar o acesso democrático à produção e à difusão cultural. Ao longo de mais de 3 décadas, a Rouanet permitiu que inúmeras iniciativas culturais, antes inviáveis, ganhassem o mundo. Revelou histórias, preservou tradições e transformou vidas. Lei Rouanet, há 33 anos tornando a cultura brasileira mais plural, acessível e democrática.
Casal de dançarinos se olham sorridentes. Uma banda orquestrada para de tocar. Logos, Lei Rouanet, Ministério da Cultura, Governo Federal, Brasil, União e Reconstrução.
Onde tem cultura, a Vale está. No poder criativo que nasce dos palcos, orquestras, das artes, das ruas e dos museus. Na valorização das diversas identidades brasileiras e na preservação de memórias. É valorizando a cultura que crescemos e evoluímos juntos. Instituto Cultural Vale.
O brasileiro não sabe ser pequeno. É da nossa natureza mover a vida como gigantes. Por isso a CCR, maior empresa de infraestrutura e mobilidade do Brasil, está movendo a sua marca para um novo momento. A CCR agora é Motiva. Mais do que estradas, trilhos e aeroportos movendo o Brasil. Uma marca que já nasce gigante, como você. Motiva. Você nos move.
Ele é uma manifestação e ele tem um porquê dele ter nascido, né? Ele nasce num contexto da escravidão, né? E ele nasce com a principal função, que é a de libertar, e que hoje ele continua com essa mesma missão, né? Porque as amarras, as correntes, elas são de outras formas.
Esse trabalho de ser autossustentável dentro do nosso território, que a gente já faz trabalho, já somos, mas cada vez mais reafirmar isso para a nova geração que aqui está, sem destruir a mata, respeitar o tempo da mata, auto-beneficiar com cuidado, né? E saber que lá atrás o tucano não estava aqui mais, né? Que, algumas aves não estavam aqui mais, hoje está no quintal cantando.
Por isso o agroecológico, você tem que pensar. Em toda a atitude que você tem que pensar.
A gente não só, a gente linkou plantar o Jussara, mas outras árvores, madeira de lei que estavam em extinção, dentro desse projeto também a gente começou a reflorestar todas as nossas áreas. Hoje essa área dá renda para nossas casas, né? Tem um produto natural, tem uma fruta, um cacau, tem o cupuaçu, tem o cambuci.
Isso para nós é conhecimento. E hoje a gente está resgatando esses conhecimentos. Lá na mata da Jurema, eu vi uma capivara. Ela estava bem comendo a semente da Jussara. A semente da Jussara. A semente da Jussara.
Ministério da Cultura e a Associação Casa Azul apresentam 23ª Flip, Festa Literária Internacional de Paraty. A Flip conta com o benefício da Lei Federal de Incentivo à Cultura, Lei Rouanet, PRONAC 235060, e possui acessibilidade para pessoas com deficiências física, visual e auditiva. Tem patrocínio Jequitibá do Nubank. Patrocínio Figueira da Vale. Patrocínio Guapuruvu do Itaú e da Motiva, por meio do seu instituto. Patrocínio Cedro do Sesc, da MAC Móveis e de O Globo. Patrocínio Araribá, da Globo Livros. Apoio institucional da Prefeitura de Paraty, Governo do Estado do Rio de Janeiro, IFAM, Instituto do Patrimônio Histórico e Artístico Nacional e Museu do Território. É uma criação e realização Associação Casa Azul e Ministério da Cultura, Governo Federal, Brasil, União e Reconstrução. Flip, o encontro da literatura com a cidade.
Piauí magazine to say that if you have any questions, feel free to write them on the slips of paper, give them to the receptionist because we'll hand them in to the media. 37 years ago, Chico Mendes was assassinated in Chapuri in Acre. 20 years ago, Dorothy Stang was assassinated in Amapu in Paraná. 3 years ago, Bruno Pereira and Dom Phillips in the Javari Valley in the Amazon. Brazil is a leader in assassination of environmental leaders. From 2012 to 2023, there were 400 assassinations of environmentalists, and more than half were indigenous leaders. Lucas Cariri Chapura, Nega Pataxó, Balmerei de Parese, Chizico Bajachara, Perongue Camão Algoró, and André de Sebastián, and Der Rufino are some of the names of environmental leaders that have been murdered in a struggle that should be that of all of us. This not to mention the hundreds of indigenous people that died from COVID because of a state policy which we hope will be tried for genocide, referring to the Bolsonaro government. As
o poeta
the poet Valdir Blanc said, who died of COVID, Brazil is killing Brazil. If there's any consolation in this, it's because we have amongst us people like our guest this evening. Celebrating life and the struggle of Marina Silva is to pay tribute to everyone who gave their lives for a Brazil that can breathe. Thank you very much. Lilian Midlej is going to chair this session.
Eu não falei para a senhora? Eu disse ela agora há pouco. Boa noite, Flip.
Good evening, Flip.
Prazer estar aqui. Eu disse agora para a ministra ali na coxinha. Eu falei, a senhora viu a fila lá fora?
Did you see the line outside? You saw a big crowd for Flip. And I said, the most difficult moments that we all have, right?
Quando ela tiver mais assim, ela lembrar.
She feels like that. She'll remember this love, this admiration, this respect,
dessa escuta que vocês mais uma vez vão praticar aqui.
And listening to her,
agradecer muito a presença de cada
I would like to thank all of you for being here, especially Minister Marina Silva, who's with us here this evening. Okay.
Eu estou sentindo assim uma mistura de sentimentos, sabe? Porque
I have mixed feelings because
é muita alegria, é muita satisfação estar aqui.
Pleasure to be here,
mas é alento também,
it is
sabe?
also a relief to see a stage like this, a space like Flip, to welcome the Minister of the Environment. She's minister today. Marina Silva is, as a minister, she's recently a congresswoman, but Marina Silva is a feminine woman activist, militant. She never gives up on Brazil and hasn't for decades. A woman who resists in many different contexts. So, in a few days ago, Minister Marina Silva, I know that the planet Earth has depleted and exhausted in 8 months. In 2025, we've already exhausted all the natural resources that were available for us this year. We've reached the exhaustion quicker than last year, even exhausting the resources. The period that I said that you were attacked on 2 different occasions. You were attacked by cowards, chauvinists, denialists, climate denialists in the Brazilian Congress, representing the Brazilian people, acting like that way, disrespecting the minister, where the place of a woman should be seen. And I can see you occupying the place they have to always occupy, which is all the stages. This makes me extremely grateful and hopeful. Having said this, Minister Marina Silva, Minister of the Environment.
A senhora representa
you
aqui
represent
a floresta,
here the forest, right? We're talking about the place of the forest in Flip, and I know that your role is literature, and the literature has in your life, in your formative years as an activist and environmentalist, as a historian. So I think that we can begin by talking about this voice that you built over time, also based on literature, which is the voice of the forest. I believe that Marina Silva personifies
a sustentabilidade.
Sustainability, right? In person, what sustainability means. So since you are here, the voice of the forest, let's begin talking about what the forest has to say to Brazil and to the world today.
Falei muito, né, ministra?
I said a lot, right, Minister?
Muito obrigada.
Thank you very much for all your kind words, and for this intense way to introduce this conversation. Okay, dear Aline, Midlej, it's great to be here with you, Aline. I want to thank all the organizers here, Luiz Calder, Mauro Munhoz, and also Ana Lima Cecílio, our curator. I'm very honored to be here, and especially I want to thank each and every one of you who are here in this auditorium, in this loving way, an affectionate way of welcoming us here. Okay, fine. I think to talk about the forest requires for us to also displace context. Okay. We're experiencing a time that is extremely strange, of total uncanniness. It's like we're losing this dimension that we are beings that are here because we are sustained by many things. We are sustained by each other and supported by each other. We are supported through this common house, which gives us this common home, giving us the possibility of existing and of having our life with other life forms and forms of existence. And amongst all these foundations for sustaining life and our life, of course, the forest has a role, an essential role, because the forest, our home, is much more than just looking at the forest as if it were something homogeneous, although it is not that diversified as in some regions of the world, the forests which are not as diversified as ours, but our country, each biome has its own incredible diversity. And normally we look at the forest, and if you don't know, you might think that it's all green jungle, but there's an infinity there of life forms which explode each instant in bacteria, in fungi, flowers, and trees, and aromas, textures, in fibers, in so many forms. And at the same time, providing so many services for the planet's equilibrium, the rain cycle in our region, and water control of several different hydrological processes in the world, are ecosystem services that are provided by the forest. Just to imagine that the Amazon forest alone produces every day 22 billion tons of water that spreads in terms of steam and all of this. It's not something that we can even imagine any kind of technology that could replace that. The forest using itself, using the wind and the sun, all the elements of nature to be able to supply water, especially in the south, the southeast of Brazil, and part of the central west of Brazil, and to imagine that more than 70%, Aline, of South America's GDP is related to the rain that is produced by the Amazon forest. So the forest is a living being, and a space also for symbolic construction of identity, science, technology. The indigenous peoples have a knowledge, ancestral knowledge, original knowledge, which cannot be compared to the postulates of science, modern science, but it is also a form of science, and perhaps a kind of science with knowledge, which is inspired by something that has been tested for much longer than our modern Western science, because the test that nature did and does dates back to millions and even billions of years to be able to see that things work, what is left in nature, which is what was tested and worked, in addition to which the forest is an incredible beauty, source of beauty in terms of images, in acoustic terms, in pictorial terms, in so many different forms. And I say this because I was born and raised in the forest ever since my early childhood. I learned a lot of things with my father, who was a rubber tapper, with my grandmother, who was a midwife, and my mother, who was a farmer. My mother, a subsistence farmer, because in the rubber groves in the semi-slavery system, you could not have actual farming, only the essential basic to survive. If you had a larger crop, you'd be fine at that time around the rubber groves. And I learned a lot with my Pedro Mendes. He was a guide and a healer and a shaman. He lived with in the upper Rio Madeira. I learned a lot with my uncle. So the forest has a difference vis-a-vis the city. The cities show themselves, they display themselves. The forest, thank you very much for that. Okay, where it displays itself, it also hides itself. It has different times it's necessary to do this reading. Like it's a space for art. This is a space for art. If I could refer to what
nos
Your
ensina
son, this
sobre o seu
concerning
feito pronto,
it's
de como deslocar
how to
o
shift
objeto
an object
e
and
ressignificar o olhar para
redefine
aquele
the
deslocamento e
gaze for that
transformar
shift
aquilo
and transform
numa
this
obra de
into
arte.
an artwork.
A floresta,
The forest
ela é
is-
feito pronto originário.
It is original,
ela já é em
it's
si
born
mesma
made.
uma forma de
Itself
arte.
is an art
E ela
form.
nos
And
ela
it
nos
evokes
convoca
and it calls
não
on us
a
not
tirar o objeto
to
do
take
lugar
objects out
para
of their place to
ressignificar o olhar,
redefine
mas
the
a
gaze, but
deixar
to leave things
aquele ser vivo,
that
aquela
living being,
condição,
that
aquela
condition,
existência viva
that
no lugar
living being
e
in its place
ressignificar,
and
não,
redefine it. Don't
significar a
to
existência
define
de
existence
algo que já
as
está
something that is
pronto.
already
Eu
ready
quero
made.
concluir
And I wish to
dizendo
conclude by
que
saying
nós somos
that we
excessivamente
are
narcisistas.
excessively narcissistic,
Nós valorizamos sobremaneira
value
aquilo que nós
especially what we
fazemos,
do,
aquilo que nós
what we
construímos, que
build,
nós
what
engenheiramos.
we
E às vezes
engineer,
não
and
damos
sometimes
o
we
mesmo
don't
valor e
give the
não
same
damos
value, and we
para
don't
aquilo
give the
que
same
nós
value
já
to what we
encontramos.
already find
Então,
ready-made
acho
in nature.
que
So I
há
believe
gesto
that there's a
que é
gesture,
criativo,
which is a creative
e há
gesture,
ato
and
que
there's
é
an act
natural,
which is natural,
que o
a
gesto
natural act,
criativo do
a creative
Duchamp,
gesture.
com o seu
Duchamp,
feito pronto,
with its
com o seu
ready-made,
urinol, com a
with
sua roda
its
de bicicleta,
bicycle wheel,
possa nos ensinar
can teach us
a deixar a floresta
to
no
leave the
lugar
forest
e
where it is
significá-la
and to
a partir da
define it
sua
based on
própria
its own
existência
existence.
e os povos
And
originários,
original-
mais do que ninguém,
Original
nos
peoples more than
ensinam
anybody else
a fazer
teach us
isso.
to do that.
Muito obrigada.
So thank you very much. The First Nations teach us to do that.
Ministra, a senhora falou muito
Minister, you
sobre
talked a
a
lot
nossa
about
relação
our
com o
relationship
tempo
to
da
time, the
natureza,
time
o
of
tempo
nature,
das
and the time
sociedades hoje,
of societies
invoca
today,
Narciso também. Então eu vou
invoking
juntar esses dois
Narcissus. So I'm going to
universos,
combine these two
trazendo
universes,
pouco de luz para momento
shedding light on a moment,
politicamente
a
preocupante, em
politically
que a gente vê a
worrisome moment
ascensão
where we can
ou a
see the rise,
reascensão de
or the
governos
new rise of
autoritários,
authoritarian governments,
egocêntricos,
egocentric ones,
negacionistas,
selfish,
intolerantes,
denialists,
a
intolerant,
legitimação de uma série
legitimation
de
of a series
violências
of forms of
que
violence
nadam
which
contra a corrente
swim
da
against the current of
sustentabilidade.
sustainability.
E no momento que a gente
At the
parece não
time
ter mais
when we
tanto
don't
tempo,
have
não é?
enough time, we don't have enough time to read, to listen, to debate calmly,
de falar, mas
to discuss calmly,
principalmente
to talk
escutar.
mainly about listening, right?
Como é que a
Especially
gente
listening.
pode
How can
repactuar a sociedade? Sei que a senhora vem falando
make a
muito
new
sobre isso,
agreement
que
for
essa
society?
COP30,
This
em que o Brasil cedia
COP30,
essa
where
COP
Brazil
no
is
coração da
hosting the COP in the heart of the
Amazônia, um dos
Amazon,
biomas mais
one of the
ameaçados
most
hoje do
threatened
planeta,
biomes
onde
on the
está perto
planet,
ali
where it's
no
close
canto do não
to the point of no
retorno, como
return,
se diz.
as people say,
Como é que
the
a
point
gente
of no
convoca a
return. How can we
sociedade
call on
para
society to
reestruturar a relação com o
restructure the
tempo,
relationship with time
inclusive de
and
observação
to
dessa mesma
observe
natureza,
this nature
para se
itself,
entender
to
parte dessa
understand part of this
natureza
nature
e conseguir construir o
and
que a senhora vem
build
chamando,
what
que eu
you've
acho
been
muito
calling, which I
interessante,
think
que é
is really
esse
interesting,
novo
that this new
coeficiente civilizatório, porque não se trata só de
civilizational
financiar e de criar
coefficients. It's not
metas,
just
mas de
financing
mudar a
with
nossa
targets, but to
relação
change our
com o
relationship
ambiente que nos
to the
cerca, não é?
environment around us, okay?
Acho que o
I
desafio
think that the
da
challenge
COP30
of
é
COP30,
imenso.
the Conference of the Parties, is
Primeiro
huge.
porque é uma
First,
COP
because
que
it's a
acontece
Conference of the
depois
Parties taking place
10 anos
after
do
10 years
Acordo de
since the
Paris,
Paris
onde
Agreement,
já
where
fechamos
we've
ciclo
closed out a
de
cycle
muitas
of 10 years with a lot of
negociações, de
negotiations
regras, de
and rules
arquitetura,
and architecture,
e,
the
enfim,
framework rather.
e
And
algumas
in a word,
decisões
some of these
relevantes,
decisions are
muito
relevant
importantes.
and extremely important,
Então,
right?
depois
So
de
after
tudo isso,
all of this,
a COP30, ela
Conference of the
acontece
Parties
para
30
mim
is happening for
em
me
contexto
in a context,
geopolítico altamente
highly
desafiador, como
challenging
todos nós
geopolitical
estamos observando,
context, as we're
em
all
que a maior
watching that
potência
the
bélica
greatest
e econômica
wartime
do
power on the
planeta sai do
planet,
Acordo de
Belarus,
Paris
is leaving
e
has left
decide
the
não só
Paris Agreement has
apoiar
decided not
guerras
only to
bélicas,
support
mas também
wars, but also
faz guerras tarifárias.
with tax
E
tariff wars,
isso
rather.
tudo
And all
faz
of
com
this
que esse
means that
contexto
this
seja
context
ainda
is
mais
even more
difícil.
difficult, right?
Por outro lado,
Meanwhile,
a COP30 não
the
tem
Conference of the
outra
Parties has no
alternativa,
other
a
alternative.
não
The
ser, como diz o
COP30,
embaixador
as
Correia do
Ambassador
Lago,
Correia do Lago
fazer
says,
grande
to
mutirão.
do a great mutirão, a
196
collective
países,
drive,
e por
180
consenso tem que
countries by
decidir que
consensus
a
have to
partir de
decide that from
agora
now on,
não tem mais o que
there's no
protelar.
more, we can't
Desde a Rio
postpone things. Ever
92
since
são
Rio 92,
33
it's been
anos.
33 years since
E
the
com
Earth
ganhos
Summit, with some gains,
a gente não
which of
pode
course we
negar,
cannot deny, not by coincidence. Correia do Lago already said that China changed a major portion of its investment as a function of the conventions, the climate conventions. It's the greatest exporter of technology for the energy transition on the planet, China. And this was a decision made looking at the negotiations of the COPs and the agreements that were signed in the conventions the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. So when we say COP30, first of all, it's not the COP of the Amazon, it's a COP in the Amazon, not of the Amazon, where multilateralism has to be strengthened, and it also has to make an effort to have credibility in its decisions under the UNFCCC. The first question that is asked, what do we need a collective effort for? There's only one answer: to implement what? What has already been decided. What has already been decided. So let's decant. We've decided, thanks to the insistence of science, that we cannot exceed 1.5 degrees Celsius in global warming, otherwise we'll enter into the point of no return. And science has insisted and persisted and has not given up, even though you don't do that in the governments, the financial system, and companies. That's no excuse for it not to be necessary. It's because you're not doing it. It's 1.5 degrees Celsius, period. So, in COP, in Dubai, COP29, the mission, you cannot exceed 1.5 degrees Celsius. For this to happen, it's necessary to make investments. So it's necessary to have financing, right? Public and private financing. But public financing from the countries needs to lead by example, to leverage, and it's not 100 billions or 300 billion dollars, it's 1.3 trillion, right? And just imagine we aren't able to get 1.3 trillion, but the world continues to invest directly or indirectly in fossil fuels, in $5 to $7 trillion in fossil fuels, and fossil activities, carbon-intensive activities. It's a struggle. It's an unequal struggle to implement, not exceed 1.5 degrees Celsius to implement, to make the means for implementation possible, and further, courageously, bravely, in the heart of the oil production, a decision was made in Dubai to triple renewable energy, to double energy efficiency, to do the transition to the end of fossil fuels, away from fossil fuels and deforestation. So we already have what we need to implement. And now, as I've said, and we've debated, in the ethical balance, it's one of the 5 cycles for mobilization of COP30, led by President Lula himself and Secretary Guterres. It's an independent process with people from civil society, artists, philosophers, religious leaders, women, Black, Indigenous, LGBTQ plus people, society from the point of view of ethics, doing an inventory to demonstrate that we do indeed have to implement these decisions. Made it COP Dubai. For this to happen, we need to do a just and planned transition, because the worst thing is for us to not prepare to change. When we don't prepare to change, we are changed, and we are already being changed by the climate emergency. What's happened in Rio Grande do Sul is changing us. The floods there, what's happening when a river dries up in the Amazon, it's changing us. When the Pantanal catches fire, it's changing us. When per year 500,000 people die from heat waves, we're changing. We have to plan the change before we are changed abruptly by external forces. How do we do this? It's not easy. It's not a stroke of magic. That's why we've defended that it's necessary for COP30 to be successful with a mandate to do the roadmap to the end away from fossil fuels, of deforestation, to make $1.3 trillion possible to help the developing countries to do this and to do their transitions.
Ministra, em alguma medida, eu vejo.
I see every day at the news of 10 p.m. that the energy production, if it is somehow happening, it's already happening in an unfair manner. Because when we see climate tragedies happening very evidently, we can see how disproportional is the way that the same tragedy affects different social groups. We had this experience in COVID, then what happened in Rio Grande do Sul, in other important floods in Bahia, Espírito Santo, now recently in the American states of Texas. We can see an unequal access to resources, to prevention, and to emergency assistance. In your opinion, not only in an exceptional year such as this one, but what is the role of literature, of the academy, of journalism, of politics in different channels and manifestations in official politics in Brasilia, in the politics going on everywhere, here at FLIP as well? What is our role in understanding this moment, of the urgency of this moment, so that we can qualify our discussions and expectations, including next year, which is an election year, and it's an opportunity to make an important choice? Well, I was thinking, what can help politics in such a dystopic moment we are living in politics? And I can see my friend Chico Alencar here. I'm amazed, and I can see my friends over there. People who have a relationship with politics, meaning that the utopia can become topic, real in our lives. But politics started the process, and I always remember what Bauman wrote in a very inspiring book called In Search of Politics, as you spoke about this, and asked what writing, art, poetry can help, and also philosophy, spiritualities. I think politics should re-signify itself based on these sources. Because as Bauman says, unfortunately, politics is devoured by the system. And as he said, if politics is only about convening people to do more of the same, and these are his words, what is politics for? Politics is not to get people together to do more of the same. Otherwise, it's mere repetition. Of course, things have to stabilize. Biology teaches us that for something to happen, we need to preserve something. I'm not here having a nihilistic view of things, but there are times when we need to break paradigms, to make a paradigm shift. And I think politics is starting to just repeat, and this doesn't help solving problems, because unfortunately we live in a system that is like the Procustus bed. It adapts things for things to continue just the way they are. I don't know if you know the story of Procustus' bed. If it was small, then you would stretch the bed. If the bed was too big, then if the bed was small, you would cut Procustus' legs. So this is what the system tries to do with everything. to devour everything. There are segments of thinking in these fields that can escape, that can slide off without being devoured by the system. So politics needs to drink from these places. I confess I'm very much inspired by this place. I think it helped me in my life, in my whole life. Art, psychoanalysis, and it may seem paradoxical, but my spirituality as well. They may seem three things that are not connected, but in fact, I also learned that these different reals can be interconnected, even if for each one to follow in its own direction. So we need to learn to interconnect. And in this place of interconnection between art, politics, and spirituality and psychoanalysis, I've been finding ways of insisting, because life is about insistence. As Hannah Arendt says, we are not born to die, we are born to begin. I think this is amazing. And Alain Didier is a French psychoanalyst who unfortunately left us a few years ago. He would say life is insistence. The unconscious is insistence. We have to insist. Politics is about insisting. So when they tell me, Marina, are you a pessimistic or not? I say, I'm not a pessimistic or an optimistic. I'm just persistent. Art is persistence. Life is persistence. It's insistence. It's not by chance that at the beginning I said, this is a woman who is a minister today, but she's a woman who never gave up Brazil. And in time, Marina faced different contexts, including in official politics. So this element of insistence is also about resistance. As you talked about insistence and spirituality, I would like to delve deeper and ask you to help us in our path of resistance. Where do you drink spiritually to be reorganized emotionally in the face of attacks we receive all over, all the time? And recently we had one in Congress. So how do you get organized to move on? How can we get organized as society at each episode, such as this one that you suffered, that hurts not only you, but also all women and all citizens who are democratic, that can feel from other people? So how do you organize yourself? How can you move forward? How can we also improve communication in the resistance as society in order to prevail? Because there are people who have been democratically elected and who have the floor legitimately. So how can we be organized socially to keep resistance? Well, there is a first resistance, which is not to use the same weapons. Because this resistance keeps us in the axis. Because when you try to use the same weapon to answer, you're already losing. Because you are becoming that which is fighting against you. So the first resistance is not to use the same weapons. And those of you who like the exercises of our Eastern friends, I think Tai Chi Chuan helps us. Do you practice Tai Chi Chuan? I've done it in the past. I don't have time anymore. So it works. Yes, it works. Tai Chi Chuan helps us a deal. So, I mean, not to use the same weapons. Second, imagine it is not an individual response. And on that day, when I suffered the aggression in the Senate and in the Chamber of Deputies again. It was interesting because when I left the place, I had a hearing with the Speaker of the House, Hugo Mota, to ask for some time for the devastation bill, for the vote. And you kept the agenda. So I talked to the press and moved on to the hearing with the Speaker of the House. And my parliamentarians who followed me in the hearing, they didn't know what had happened in the Senate. So they said, "So how are you, Marina? How are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I won't get not even a hug from them." And then they found out what happened, and they said, "Oh, I'm so sorry about what happened to you." Because the resistance, the reorganization is also collective. Because we need to cultivate the heterostimulus. I had a bright teacher in psychopedagogy, Alicia Fernandez. She wrote a wonderful book called Languages of Learning. And Alicia Fernandez taught me, as well as Jorge, an Argentinian psychoanalyst, they taught me the following. We don't have self-esteem. We have heteroesteem. It's about the diversity, the meeting of speeches, looks. It is in the difference that we are supported. And having received a wave of solidarity right after that helped me reorganize. Because you know you're not being attacked as an individual. What is being attacked is the fact I was a woman, I was black, I was humble, I was standing up for a common cause. And when everyone comes from this place saying, I'm here because I don't want to see a black woman being attacked. I don't want to see a woman, white or black, being attacked. I don't want to see the environmental cause being disrespected and denied in the face of the greatest crisis ever. So it is a way of reorganizing yourself. And reorganizing also with other people. At that moment, I talked to my assistant. You know that when we are in that place, I'm very careful when in wearing the seatbelt. But my driver lately has always been telling me, reminding me, because I go into the car and I start reading the documents. And I forget about the seatbelt. So I was reading the document, and she told me, "Did you see the president was hospitalized again?" And I was scared. Because again, he had to go through a procedure. Thank God it was not serious, not severe. But when I left that place, he called me. And I even forgot it could be because of the aggression. So I asked him, "How are you doing?" And he said, "When I saw you standing up and leaving the place, I felt better." And that, again, was a moment of support, because he was resting in hospital, and he called me, and he said he felt better because he watched me leaving the place. So it's this kind of thing that helps us organize. Sometimes we don't agree with everything we see. There are many people here may not agree with me, but there is a basis that is essential and we cannot forget. We are human. And in this place, it's where we meet. Minister Marina speaks about the human essence. I'm always very happy in hearing about this. We are humans, we feel, we make choices. So I want to speak about the human essence and the relationship with nature, because we are nature, but it seems we forgot about it. And as we spoke about President Lula and the hugs you received that day, how many hugs are here, right? So many hugs are possible here. How can you govern at the moment? You are facing a huge challenge in the Lula administration to decide about a bill that relaxes the environmental licensing in Brazil. We have Deputy Chico Alencar present here, and he mentioned the Paulo Leminski flip. It's a PL, Paulo Leminski, his initials, and the licensing PL, which means bill in Portuguese. So he made this comparison. How can you govern in such a moment like this one and maintain the democratic essence in your political history, to be able to maintain, to keep speaking in an environment, in a place where dialogue is not desired, when discussing is not a possibility because there is no listening, there is only disrespect? How can you govern and deal with such a controversial, so to speak, bill and keep governing? And in this context, be an important mediator, because you had a ministry that is directly impacted by the bill. How can you act in the days to come in such an important theme? Environmental licensing is the main vertebra of environmental protection in Brazil. I can't see how we will be able to reach the CO2 remission goals if the licensing is disfigured as this bill is doing, as it was approved in Congress. I cannot imagine how we're going to end deforestation by 2030, and we achieved good results. In the past 2.5 years, we reduced deforestation by 46% in the Amazon, 25% in Cerrado, 77% according to the DT in Pantanal, and a reduction on average of 32%. So I cannot see how we can keep reaching these results if the devastation bill is maintained as it was approved. And even the need of development that we all wish, of course, the agility in the licensing procedures that we all want. How can we reach that? Because as it was approved, what will happen is a generalized process of judicialization, because anyone who feels he was damaged, he will judicialize, because this is based on the Constitution and on the ordinary legislation. So what they say is good is no good. Gaining agility doesn't mean losing quality. So for you to have an idea what I'm talking about, there is a mechanism that establishes that each municipality, each state can decide the regulation and types of licensing. So if we have more than 5,000 municipalities, if each one can decide the types of licensing, do you think nature will change because the mayor's ideology changed, or because the investor's ambition increased? The laws of nature won't change based on our interests. The river contaminated by heavy metal in Minas Gerais is the same river that will be contaminated in Espírito Santo. And technically, scientifically, there is no way to have a different type of licensing. So this is going to be tried in the courts. And for the interest of businessmen, legal insecurity is not good. Not to speak about commercial interests in Brazil. For you to have an idea, in the past 2 years in the Lula administration, according to the Minister of Agriculture, we opened 381 markets for Brazilian agriculture. 381 markets. What caused the change? Why did these markets open in 2.5 years and were not open before? The health value of our products, they are very good. The nutritional value is equally good. Our technical ability of production and Embrapa plays a role, but the private sector also invested a lot in research. We produce in quantities which is fundamental to stabilize any flows in the market. All that already existed, with one differential, is that people started trusting that the environmental legislation was complied with, that deforestation was stopped, that the indigenous peoples with intrusions in the Yanomami, Kayapó lands and all the other lands that are invaded was going on. So you empty the non-tariff arguments because there is an economic dispute as well. And if I have a noble justification not to open a market, well, then I have a noble justification. But when you show that deforestation dropped by 46% and agribusiness grew by 15%, and the per capita income increased 11%, and jobs increased almost to full employment, what is the conclusion? You don't need to destroy to grow and develop. And this makes all the difference.
So it's in dialogue to show it's pedagogical. There's different types of pedagogy that have pain, that have mourning, that have lost, and do not reach an agreement between the European Union and the Mercosur. I think it's a kind of pedagogy of loss. So dialogue for us to be able to do this. Why? Because any initiative made or taken, if it's a veto, because it doesn't suffice to veto, you have to replace it with something. So is it a bill? Is it an executive order? It has to be in dialogue with Congress, both houses. In democracy, it's like that. You have to talk with dialogue. As my master said, do everything again, make it new, not repetition, doing everything again, but new in a process of convincing. But now, even Trump says that he's applying rules, how do you call them, tariffs, because he was worried about the issue of deforestation and loosening of environmental rules. Even Trump, I would imagine that we are going to be able to succeed in a new space for dialogue, because all of this serves as a pretext sometimes for some people, because they don't want it for the flow of resources for them to come in a different direction. I'm going to poke you again because I'm a journalist. I'm going to provoke you again. But we could say that there's a kind of pedagogy being built now for democratic confrontation with possible vetoes to the licensing, delicensing bill. Did I interpret your read between the lines? You know that journalists, they ask things from various different angles, the same thing, but the answer that they want is the same, right? Okay. When it's a good journalist, all the more so. Right? I have a friend, a great friend of mine. He's a journalist, right? Toninho Alves. I joke with him that he's an old man of the river. He understands everything about the rivers and creeks of Acre. He's a great journalist. Toninho, I say to him, I'm afraid to talk to you because I like him so much and I admire him so much that I would like to open up my heart to him when we like somebody, right? You remember that he's a journalist, right? Okay, he's a journalist. Okay, I better take it easy with him. Mince my words, right? Diplomatically. A rigorous analysis being done. There are more than 600 articles, more than 300 different provisions. An analysis which is being done in constant dialogue, intense dialogue with the Ministry of the Environment, which is the Ministry, the Office of the Chief of Staff, and the Institutional Relations Office. We're concluding this work. Afterwards, we're going to have a conversation with the rapporteur, with the president of both houses, with the leaders of the caucuses, with our leaders, with the members of Congress, and I believe that there begins to be a welcoming spirit, and that's what politics is about. If you change the understanding and we can build something different, you have to march forward. As my grandmother said, you have to walk forward. So what's being done, what they're doing is the analyses that are going to be submitted to the President Lula, with all due respect for democracy and the autonomy of the three branches of government, which in Brazil, they are independent, right? Here in Brazil, they will be submitted back to the Congress for the necessary debate. That's the process with the separation of powers. Let's make a bridge from politics to literature. There's a constant connection because there are a lot of different literatures and a lot of them are essentially political as well. I would like to raise a personal experience for us to be able to bring experiences from the minister and her life story to personal, professional, political life, and where in literature, where do the inspirations come for you, and especially how literature can provide us and supply us and back us, even based on playful things. I'm very playful because I have a 2-year-old girl. I read to her. I've read to her since she was 3 months old. I have the social privilege of having access to literature ever since I was a young girl. Celeste has access to literature. If she heard since an early age, it could stimulate her to take interest in reading. At 2 years of age, she already loves the books. She spends a lot of time with the books. There's a minute that I remembered I would like to share with you for us to move forward on this theme. A book that I read to Celeste ever since she was 3 months old. The name of the book is My Favorite Tree. That's the name of the book. It's by a Canadian writer, Marie-Louise Gay. It was released this year here in Brazil. In translation, it tells the story of a girl that asks for a tree. She wants a real tree for her birthday present. An 8-year-old girl wants it. The mother doesn't understand. She says, but the girl insists, and the mother gives her a tree planted in a flower vase, and she calls the tree George. This tree becomes her best friend of this girl, the 8-year-old girl. And this story, it's a children's story that tells the story of the tree George and this girl, and how that experience of the tree in her life transformed her family's view of a tree, and the entire neighborhood, which kneeled down before the tree. Everybody wanted to have a tree because of the well-being and the shadow that tree provided, because of the pure air that it caused. And this book caught me, and I've been thinking about it. I'm going to rereading it to Celeste every once in a while because her understanding expands and grows. I truly believe that this can plant things. I believe that I can plant things in my daughter. I would like to hear you considering this word literature entered into your life, where it remains, and the path that it should open up for all of us here in the auditorium for an environmental awareness of what nature is. And I remember our dear Ayrton Krenak, the indigenous leader, shouts, "We are nature." It's not about nature. We are nature. How can, based on the playful letters and literature, we can redefine what nature is for us to be able to relate to nature differently? Okay, literature entered my life very early in childhood through my grandmother, who was illiterate, from the northeast of Brazil. Literature, Cordel literature, the chapbooks. So my grandmother was illiterate, but she was a person with amazing intelligence, privileged. My father could read. My father took 3 years in elementary school. When he went there to the rubber groves in Acre, my grandmother worked in a wealthy family's home, my grandmother, and she was able to have my father study 3 years in grade school, up to the 3rd year in primary school. That was a lot at that time. My father was great in mathematics, but he read like chapbooks, or novels rather, chapbooks twice, and my father memorized the chapbooks, the names of the chapbooks, Juvenal and other titles. It was amazing. She knew a lot. She had memorized all these chapbook stories from the northeast of Brazil. This is part of my esteem for others. She sang to me. Marina was a rich, polite girl, and her father was a baron, but she washed dishes because she could not sing lullabies, right? But so I felt Marina herself. Right? I was Marina. So, but literature, Cordell, or chapbook literature brought the playful element, and it was a great stimulus for me. I was illiterate up to 16 years of age, but I was a PhD in narratives, right? Because I knew the narratives, it's kind of knowledge, and it's a way of you feeling, it's another way, I don't know, it's a paradox, what I'm going to say. And literacy, it's another form of literacy, but I was a PhD in narratives because my grandmother, she acted out the chapbooks. She loved the songs from the Northeast and the chants. She took a little stool. She sat on this wooden stool. It wasn't Zé Pretinho. She was the blind man Heraldo, and she acted out the characters in addition to having made a collection, incredible collection of 12 different rag dolls. I remember the names of each of these rag dolls. I can't say the names. There's Ailda, there was Jacinto, who was Catifunte. The little English doll was the only one. She was rather conceited. She was purchased from a store. There were rag dolls when I was a kid, I would imagine. Okay. She was very conceited and stuck up, right? So that was a playful world for me. I was a child. I was raised by my grandmother, where there were only elderly people in that home. I was my grandmother, my single spinster aunt, my single uncle, my grandfather, and a man who was Vovô Manuel, who was abandoned because he was a rubber tapper. He grew old. He could never go back to the state of Ceará, Northeast, and my father welcomed him into the home, and he raised in our home. There were a lot of stories from the elders. Just imagine a bunch of grandparents. I had several grandparents, so the literature entered through that route when I went to the city, and I learned to read and write. I devoured books. I think that to this day I have to set aside some time to feed myself on more reading. This is good because, as I say, art and literature help us. We are permeated by a lot of things and crisscrossed. One day somebody criticized me because I used a Bible verse in a debate, not to convince anybody of anything. I just wanted to cite a Bible verse, but you're crisscrossed. If you're a scientist, you're going to use a metaphor from science. If you are a writer, you're going to do the same thing. If you're a mathematician, that's what life is like. There's no aseptic approach to what you are. So this place is extremely important in each of us. And if there is something which educated me and which stimulated me to study, it was my dream to be a nun, but also it was one of these chapbooks, because there was a challenge between Inácio de Catingueira and Romano. It was a duel between two singers. One was an educated man from the city, another illiterate man from the backwoods, and everybody, the hinterlands, all gathered around to watch that duel between the two singers. And they wanted the backlander to win, but they go to the duel. Look at the force of the written word or spoken word, or sung word and went as if it were this place here, right? And me and Aline, if I was Inácio da Catingueira and you were Romano, and the person that announced the duel of the two singers, who was going to announce this, they would say, he entered into the space and said to the audience, which was the duel. Today we have to see a lightning from snails and the seal dry out. And I could fish for whales with a hook. How could you fish for a whale with a fish hook? So they began a fish line. And Inácio defied and challenged. I know that you had the force of the rings. Sing up to 2, sing up to 7, 9, or 10. But the challenge is with your hands, is what you do with your feet. This is the backlander challenging the educated person from the capital city. A time comes where the scholar loses, because if you know what a refrain is, everybody knows what a refrain is. Everybody knows what a refrain is, but the refrain is to sing things from the backlands, the scrub forest. And when he's going to lose, he realized he changed to talk about in the field of science. And so he used that of physics. I think it's physics, the field of physics. So he says, if I could give a hammer to Noah, he would not dismantle the ship if it's science. You sing alone and I'll go quiet. And he lost the duel, and all the hinterlands were outraged because there had been a trick, a cheating. They were cheating, and I wept. If you realize, I'm still moved to this day because of this duel in the backlands against the university professor, because Inácio, the backlander, lost. And I was going to say, grandmother, why did he lose, grandma? And she said, Granny, it was because he was illiterate. That was a lesson. I said, I don't want to be illiterate. If I can be a backlander and lose out in a duel, singing duel with a university professor, I don't want to be illiterate.
Que bom para o Brasil, né?
It's great for Brazil. Blessed is the day that you saw that poster in the church.
A senhora ainda sonhava em ser freira naquela época.
You still dreamed of being a nun. You saw that poster when you were a young girl. The meeting in the rural union. Chico Mendes is going to be there. You said, that's where I'm going to go, right? And you discovered that your faith could act in politics. Just imagine what Brazil would be, the environmental debate in Brazil, without this choice that you made on that day. If this choice, this primordial choice of following the path of letters and literature, we want to thank you for your persistence as well. Time is always relentless with us. That's amazing.
Faltam 13 minutos, então
there are 3 minutes left, so I'm going to begin with a little bit of you, bring you closer. Some of the questions are for each. I'm going to try to combine a little bit of some of them for us to be able to take advantage of the 3 minutes left. I want to pick up on this nostalgic moment of Minister Marina Silva to add to her talk, this historic time of intellectual formative years, and for her to add to several questions here with questions on people who brought you up, formed you, in addition to Chico Mendes, this reference in your career that we all know, but people who gave you their hand, reached out and gave you their hand with inspiration and references. But those times, the serious times, difficult times, they held their hand out and are still your references if you could quote. It's always complicated to quote just a few. I know that, but some of them that you or somebody that you consider a basis for your life, and you can explain this time, the present time of your life, right? Okay. So it's a collective, a huge collective, but obviously my father, my grandmother, my mother, that was my base, because I was born in a community of service people. This family was my power, my family of matriarchs. And if somebody asks me how you form a matriarchy, I cannot explain it. It's a system, it's a structure, and I can't explain it. But
mãe do meu pai
The
era
mother of my
matriarca,
father
mãe
was a
da minha mãe
matriarch.
era
My mother's
matriarca,
mother
minha
was a
mãe era
matriarch. My mother was a
matriarca, todas as
matriarch. All
irmãs
of
dela
her
eram
sisters were
matriarcas. Do lado
matriarchs.
do meu pai,
On my
todas
father's
as
side,
mulheres
all of the women were
matriarcas.
matriarchal.
E na minha
And in my
família,
family,
também as minhas
also
7
my
irmãs são
7 sisters are
matriarcas.
matriarchs.
Tem a matriarca
And
das
there's the
matriarcas, que
matriarch
não
of the
sou eu.
matriarchs, which is
Eu tô
not
lá
me.
no rabo da
I am
fila.
at the end of the line of matriarchs.
É a
right?
Anita.
It's
Anita
Anita.
teve paralisia
Anita
infantil.
had polio,
Todo mundo
infant
paparicava
paralysis,
Anita,
and
porque ela
everybody
tinha risco
spoiled
de
her
cair,
because
que ficou com as
she
perninhas
might fall.
fracas.
She had weak legs.
Pensa numa mulher
If you think of a
potente.
powerful woman, it's
Quando
when
eu vou revelar
I'm going to
segredo
tell
para
a
vocês.
secret
Eu fui
to all.
candidata
I
a
was a
presidente
candidate
3
for
vezes.
president 3 times
Não
here in
teve
Brazil.
uma vez
There was not one
que eu
single time
decidi
that I
antes de
decided
conversar
before
com ele.
talking to Alita, my sister, who had
É.
polio.
Então,
So
é
she's
uma família de
disabled,
matriarcas.
a family of
Então,
matriarchs.
isso é uma
So
força
that was her sister.
que
So this is
é
a
muito
force,
forte na minha
a strong
família, né?
force in my
Então,
family. So
a outra coisa
the other
assim,
thing that I
que eu acho que
believe
tem uma força muito
with a
grande,
huge force
as pessoas que
is
me
people
influenciaram.
that
Chico
influenced
Mendes,
me. Chico
que
Mendes,
foi mestre, foi
he was
irmão,
my master,
foi
my
amigo.
brother, my
A
friend.
gente tinha ali
We
uma diferença de
had some
idade.
differences in
né?
age,
Eu,
and
quando eu o
when
conheci,
I
eu tinha
met him,
17
I was
anos,
17
ele
years
já era
old. He
homem
was
adulto,
already an adult,
e foi nesse
and it
curso
was
da
in
pastoral
the course of the
que você se
pastoral
referiu,
mission that you
né?
referred to.
Que o padre fez
The
uma
priest
propaganda agressiva do
announced
curso do
the
Clodovil
course
Boff e do
or
Chico Mendes
Boff
para
and
os
Chico
trabalhadores
Mendes
rurais.
for
Eu fui à
the
missa, eu
rubber
morava
tappers.
no
I went to the
pré-noviciado,
miss.
no
I
convento,
was
e
living in
as
the
irmãzinhas,
convent,
elas
and the
achavam que
sisters
quem
thought that
defendia
people that
seringueiro
defended
e
rubber tappers
indígena
and indigenous people
era do capeta.
were the devil's work.
E
Like
aquilo me
commies,
incomodava muito.
and that bothered me
Porque
a
eu dizia,
lot
mas quem
because
defende a gente é do
people,
capeta. E quem
if people that defend us
perseguindo a
are
gente é
the
de Deus,
devils,
isso não
and the
cabia.
people that persecute us are
Com
for
17
God.
anos.
I couldn't
Aí,
understand that
e
when
o
I was
Chico Mendes
17,
era
and
mal
Chico
falado, o
Mendes
bispo
was
Dom Moacir
bad
era mal
mouth.
falado,
The bishop there
e
bad
eu vou
mouthed
pra
him.
missa.
I went to the
Quando
mass.
eu
When
chego na missa,
I
a
got to the
porta
mass,
da
the door
sacristia
to
era
the
azul.
sacristy was
A
blue.
cartolina
The
era azul.
poster
A
was
caneta
blue.
esferográfica
The
que
ballpoint
anunciava
pen
o
that
curso
announced the
era
course
azul.
was blue.
Uma propaganda muito agressiva.
Very
Que
aggressive
era para não ser visto, eu
advertising. It
acho.
wasn't supposed to be
Então,
seen
mas eu
even,
vi.
but I saw it
Curso
nevertheless.
de liderança
A course
sindical
on
rural com
rural
Clodovil
trade
Boff e Chico
union
Mendes.
with Clovis
Eu me
Boff
inscrevo no curso.
and Chico
Chego no
Mendes.
convento
Of
e
course,
falo
I
pra
got
minha
to the
madre
convent and I
mestra,
sent
irmã,
to the
eu
mother,
vou fazer o curso
none.
sábado
I
e
said, I'm
domingo.
going
E
to
ela
take the
falou, que
course on
curso é esse,
Saturday and
Maria?
Sunday. Maria, what
O meu
course
nome
is
é
this?
Maria
My name is
Osmarina
Maria
da
Osmarina
Silva,
Maria
né?
da
Então,
Silva.
ela só me
It's a
chamava
long
de
name, but she
Maria.
called me Maria.
Aí, eu
And
digo, é um
I said,
curso
it's a
que o
course
padre
that the
quer que a
priest
gente
wants
faça.
us to take. A white
Eu
lie, right?
dei uma
Okay.
ênfase assim,
I gave
sabe,
emphasis to
forte.
that, strong emphasis to the
Porque
fact
eu
the
acho que aí é
priest
pecado
recommended
venial,
it.
né?
I think it's a white lie or a lesser sin, let's say, a petty
Aí
sin.
fiz o curso
I did the
e
course.
foi aí que tudo
That's where
começou,
everything
né?
got started.
A questão
The
da
issue
política,
of politics.
daquilo que eu fazia,
What I
de ser
did
apaixonada
to
pela
be
natureza,
to love
por
nature
tudo,
and everything,
mas eu
but
não tinha ali uma
I
formação política
didn't have a
naquilo.
political
E aí eu entendi
background, but I
eu
understood
não
that
conseguia
I would
mais
not
ser
be
o que
able
eu
to
queria.
be
Eu
what I
queria ser
wanted to
uma
be. I wanted to
pessoa
be somebody
que ia viver
who would
reclusa em
live
oração.
as a recluse
né?
and praying
E aí
as a
eu
nun.
decidi
And I
que eu ia
decided that I was going to
fazer da
do
minha ação
make
a
my
minha
action
oração.
my prayer, right?
Né?
Make my
E
action my
foi
prayer.
assim que
And that was how it all started.
eu saí.
That was
Aí,
how I left the
Bispo Dom
nunnery.
Moacir, Chico
The
Mendes,
bishop and
Marilena
Chico
Chauí,
Mendes, Marilena
Florestan
Chauí,
Fernandes,
Florestan
Edgar Morin,
Fernandes, Edgar
Deleuze,
Morin,
e aí
Deleuze,
o céu é o limite.
and the sky is the limit, right?
Porque tudo isso me
Deleuze, because
atravessa.
everything
Luiz
like of that
Inácio Lula da
crisscrossed
Silva,
me.
Suplicy,
Lula,
Benedita,
Suplicy, Benedita,
Gabeira,
Gabeira,
Sirquis
Sirquis,
e o Gabeira
Sirquis and
fizeram o meu
Gabeira
letramento em
did my
ecologia.
literacy
Sabia?
in ecology.
Nunca me esqueço
They
quando
educated me.
Chico
I
Mendes
never
falou,
forgot when
disse,
Chico Mendes
o
talked about this.
Gabeira disse que
Gabeira
isso que a
said
gente faz
that what we
aqui
do here
é
is
defesa da ecologia.
defense of
Aí o
ecology. And
pessoal
so
perguntou, e
people
o que
ask
que é
him,
isso, Chico?
what is this?
Ele disse,
Chico
acho que é
Mendes, he
alguma
said, I think
coisa
it
de
has
comer.
something
Ele
to
brincou,
do,
né?
it's something to eat, right? Defending ecology. But he knew what it was nevertheless. So these people, all these people, and the roots, my original roots to this day, That's how it goes. We're crisscrossed by a lot of gazes. In 82, I had a meeting, a magic encounter with psychoanalysis. I fell in love, and to this day, I am love. I would like to be a psychoanalyst. I even attempted my training, but I had an ethical dilemma because when I was going to receive the pilot patients, I thought to myself, okay, fine, as a psychoanalyst, I cannot talk, right? I just have to listen. As a politician, I cannot be silent if the person comes to me and to tell a sin about corruption that they've committed, something like that. I'm a senator. I cannot be silent. And the choice was obviously to not be able to be silent, right? So that's how I chose between psychoanalysis and politics, because as a psychoanalyst, that's part of the ethics. Psychoanalysis and politics, they sound contradictory. Politics is fed by promise. There's no politics without promise. And analysis says that, right? That for the unpredictable, the power of promise. For the predictable, the power of pardon. It's a human condition. And psychoanalysis says, no, you don't have to make promises. They have to get by with their own things and get by. And it helps us to find the paths and amongst us, from ourselves. That's why Freud says it's possible to cure, to govern, to rule. It's impossible to educate. And Lacan says it's impossible to make someone desire. Okay, that's great.
We only have 5 minutes to go, and I have to make a very important reference to Alessandra Sampaio, the widow of Dom Phillips, is following this session. I don't know if she's here or if she's following online. There she is with Dom Phillips' book. She wants to give you a copy of the book. All my love to you, Alessandra. Thank you, Alessandra. All my love to you, to your family, and everybody who is still struggling for the preservation of Jaguari and the whole Amazon, and someone who's still at risk. So we can conclude by talking about those who take care of the forest and how we take care of those who take care of the forest. Can we talk about this? Thank you, Alessandra. How can we save the Amazon? This trial is going on. It's emblematic of what's going on in the Amazon, but not only that, how the indigenous people, the guardians of the forest, are still being threatened. How can we take care of those who take care of us? Because those who are taking care of the forest are taking care of us. Yes, taking care of the forest means taking care of us. And the people who took care, Dom Phillips, Chico Mendes, Dorothy, and so many others, from my 18, when I was 18 to 28, 27, I saw 6 people losing their life in Acre alone. And we have an agreement to protect the lives of military activists of the environment. It has to be ratified in Congress, and it hasn't been even discussed. We have been working on it, Minister Macaé, Minister Aniele, and other leaders, to ratify this agreement. which is a way of protecting those who take care of nature. So I think we should make a loving manifestation to life and appeal to Congress asking for the ratification of this agreement, Escazú agreement, which is a way of participating in the international treaty. Brazil is the third or second country with more violence against environmental activists. And it's very sad to go to the convention as a guest rather than as a party, because to this day, the agreement has not been ratified. And for us to participate, we need to ratify the agreement. Another way is with the Solidarity Network. You from the media do a great job. It's very painful when I remember the last time I talked to Chico Mendes. I was going to São Paulo, but before that I went to Chapuri, and he drove me to the bus station. And on our way, there was some silence between the two of us, and then I had insisted a lot because Gabeira, Sirquis, Lucélia Santos had asked him to come to Rio de Janeiro because he was threatened. And he said, I will not leave my brothers behind. So I had insisted, but I found he wouldn't leave the place. So we walked to the bus station, and there was silence. And on our way, he hugged me, and he would call me nega velha, old black lady, so to speak. And he said, yeah, nega velha, this time there's no way they will get me. And I said, well, Chico, let's go to the town and report this to the press. And he said, it's no use. Every time I speak, they say I do this to promote myself. When I die, they will see it was not to promote myself. So today there were so many people speaking with strength, with power. It was a different time, a different time. The struggle was anticipatory. Nobody even knew what flying rivers were, and Chico would talk about this. So it was very hard. But when I hear people like you, Sérgio Abrantes, Miriam Leitão, and so many others, there are so many journalists, they all speak about this. We don't have specialized journalists anymore. Well, there are still some, but they all did some literacy about life, pedagogy, pain. There are people in the world of literature who do this as well, like you, who bring the climate issue to the discussion, and it helps a lot. So how can we save the Amazon? How can we save people who help saving the Amazon, Cerrado, our Brazilian savanna, Caatinga, the hinterlands, the brushlands, the Pantanal, and all Brazilian biomes? We have to work so as not to have heroes, because heroes speak against us. Do you know that? Heroes are extraordinary people because we don't change that extraordinary cause into an ordinary action. When we are all activists, climate activists, activists for the jungle, for biodiversity, we won't need heroes anymore. They will still be there. They will always be there. But our role is to make the extraordinary ordinary. We reached the end of our session. I'd like to thank Flip for the invitation, for this precious look to the importance of inviting someone as Marina Silva to Flip. And I'm sure if there is a God, he's a woman, because otherwise we wouldn't be here. We are next to a woman who is a black woman coming from the forest, a black woman who has been insisting to exist in this world and to make a difference. A female existence, an inspiring woman, and I wish you all well in this path. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.